Quiet down. Good morning, everybody. My name's Alan Hook. I am a water resources coordinator with the City of Santa Fe Water Division. So I'm going to talk to you today about our sources of water, and then the subject about water development around Santa Fe itself and the region. So with that, I am going to see how okay, so this is part of my PowerPoint. And again, just the subject, do we have enough water to support further development around city of Santa Fe? So I'm going to hopefully in this talk address that issue and answer it. And again, it was noted, last year we had a mega drought, one of the worst in the West, more than 1,200 years. In 2019, we had a really good snowpack year, at least locally here. It was a really good snow year on the Rio Grande, but then the subsequent 3 years were very, very extreme drought. And of course, we had the Caps Canyon Hermit's Peak fire last year as a result of those drought conditions. So we have 4 drinking water supplies. We have the Santa Fe River, again, which we refer to in the water division as the Santa Fe Municipal Watershed. We have 2 reservoirs there. Typically, the Santa Fe River itself supplies us up to 40% of our surface water supply. We also have our city well field, which is the highlighted in kind of the brown portion. We have our Buckman wells, which are towards the Rio Grande. I don't know if you've ever been down Buckman Road past La Tierra area or Las Campanas. That's where we have 13 Buckman wells. So that's our part of our groundwater supply. And then, of course, the Rio Grande, we have the Buckman direct diversion. So you can see here, if I'm pointing that correctly, is our Buckman direct diversion, which is off the Rio Grande. So that is actually diverting water off the Rio Grande from the San Juan Chama project. So the San Juan River is one of the headwaters to the Colorado. And long ago in the 1960s, they created the tunnels, one of them being Azoteo Tunnel. So they divert water off the Navajo, Little Navajo, and the Blanco watersheds to get to the other side of the Continental Divide into first it's Heron, then Elvado, and then down to Abiquiu. From Abiquiu, we move water through the Chama River down to the Rio Grande River. So if you think of the surface water supplies, so our San Juan Chama project water and our Santa Fe River water, that's kind of like our checking account, whereas the city well field and Buckman well field is more like our savings account. So every year we're trying to use as much of our surface water as possible so that we don't have to dip into using city well field. So you can see kind of these are the volumes in 2022. So 41% of the water supply came from the San Juan Chama off the Rio Grande. So this is this area. And then these little dots are the Buckman well field 1 through 13 here. So we're moving lots of water to the city of Santa Fe. Again, 41% from the Buckman project via the BDD. That's Buckman direct diversion, and we call it BDD for short. And then from the Santa Fe River up in the watershed up here through our Canyon Road water treatment plant. So last year that was 39%. And then wells, we did 20% for both Buckman well field and the city well field. So that's a total of 8,685 acre feet. So an acre foot is an old farm measurement. It's if you were a farmer and you had a farm field of 1 acre, right? So you got an acre and you flooded that farm field 1 foot deep, that would be 365,000 gallons approximately. So it's basically for every 1,000,000 gallons of water, it's 3 acre feet. 3.067 is how we talk about it. So this graphic kind of shows you our water supplies and how we're utilizing all 4 of those water supplies. Okay, so we talk about our sustainability loss in this graphic. So on the horizontal line on the bottom, we go from 1925 up into 1995. And on the vertical, this is our annual water production. This is in thousands acre feet. So this would be 2,000 acre feet, 4,000, so on and so forth. And you can see we had exponential demand growth. So the blue shaded area, that's Santa Fe River water. So this is before we had Buckman well field. Yellow is going to be our local well field within the city limits. And then Buckman wells 1 through 13 are in the orange. So you can kind of see we're always using our surface water supply out of the municipal watershed, so out of the Santa Fe River. And then adding to that, when we have a deficit of this demand growth, so the dotted line moving up, we fill that in with our city well field. Oh, let me go back, sorry. So kind of we call it the first act of the story is that, you know, we were increasing demand more and more. We were trying to live within our limits of the Santa Fe River. But again, if the surface water supply of the Santa Fe River is our checking account, we were dipping into the city well field and then subsequently the Buckman well field in our savings account. So we were in a sustainably lost scenario. We weren't going to be able to sustain continuous groundwater pumping. So this is kind of the second act where we talk about sustainability plan or found, I should say, as part of planning. So you can see in 2011, we added the Buckman direct diversion supply, and that's the dark blue area. But, you know, back in 95, so in 95, the city of Santa Fe bought the water utility from P&M. So all this historical period, P&M owned the water utility. The city of Santa Fe bought it. We didn't actually take over the management of the water utility until about 99, because there's a lot of legal transactions, management transactions, hiring personnel. So, but during this time, we started doing a lot more, and even P&M started doing a lot more water conservation policies. And that really led to, you could see the drops in the demand and the production throughout time. So up until 2022, we had 33% reduction in our total production. So that's, you know, real savings for the city of Santa Fe as compared to the peak in 1995. We were kind of in an unsustainable scenario. And now, especially with Buckman direct diversion online, we really started, you know, reducing our production. So the one statement we have is from that time until now, dramatic conservation is reduced our total water demand by a third, even while the population served grew by 25%. So this chart shows the population served from 1995 through 2022, and actually all the way to 2020. Yeah, 2022 on the end there. So again, these are the years 95. This is consumption in gallons per capita per day. So this is kind of a standard measurement through New Mexico of how many gallons does each individual use per day. So you can see in 95, we were at like 168, really high. And through conservation, you know, immediately that first year we dropped off down below 100. And then it would slowly, dramatically changed it. And you can see there's a real drop here during these drier years, kind of end of 2009 into 10. The biggest one was this 2001 to 2002. This was before we got our Buckman wells 10 through 13, but that was a very dramatic dry years. It was kind of a series of 2 years. One of those La Nina years where, you know, the city decided we're going to cut off water to the parks because we were like at our very just fine line of demand surpassing our production, which is not a place you want to be as a water utility. So we were moving as much water as we could out of Canyon Road and our treatment facility on the Santa Fe River. We didn't have Buckman direct diversion yet with our San Juan Chama project water. We were utilizing the city well field to their max. And again, you know, during this period, we eventually got 10 through 13, our Buckman wells, which are our deepest wells, but 1 through 9 were, you know, we were utilizing those wells to the max of their capacity. So 10 through 13 are our deepest wells. They go over, you know, beyond 1,500 feet down. So those were sort of emergency wells that the state engineer allowed us to have. So this is, again, a scenario where we really dramatically cut back production. But because of that, a lot of conservation measures can have continued forward. In other words, the idea during the summer months that we only water 3 times per day. Other measures, like we have a rebate program for washing machines. You can get a credit towards your water bill if you take out your old washing machine and you take it to Lowe's, and or some of the others like Home Depot. They'll actually just recycle those washing machines, and then you get a credit towards a new washing machine. But you got to make sure the old one, you don't sell the old one to your cousin or to your brother, or, because we want to take it out of the demand scenario. Okay. And again, the other key to finding sustainability is bringing the Buckman direct diversion online. It's a second river-based water supply. And in 2011, you can see again the dark blue. Again, we're really dramatically dropping out our well pumping. Again, well pumping is not sustainable. A lot of this water in the area is like 60,000 years old in our aquifers. So replacing that when you've really pumped it down creates a dramatic draw on the sustainability of our regional aquifer, I should say. So wells, which had made up 65% of our water supply from 95 through 2010, have accounted for less than a quarter of that supply since then. So again, this is really emphasizing the idea of sustainability found. So groundwater recovery, the good news is our savings accounts since 2010, our wells have been recovering from decades of almost overuse. Again, that graphic showing the dramatic years where we had high levels of drought. We didn't have surface water supplies from the Santa Fe River. We didn't have Buckman online, so we really had to pump our wells. So we really, again, the idea is to keep our wells in reserve as kind of a drought-proof backup. So aquifer replacement, we've rebounded, I think it's 60 feet in 2010, because we had already drawn down about 150 feet, but we've rebounded another 60 feet. So in other words, that pumping down effect around the well field, you get what's called a cone of depression. That pumping effect really dropped the aquifer about 150 feet. But now that we're really 90% or more of our water supplies from surface water supplies, we rebounded 60 feet. So we've had there's a net depletion, what is that, 90 feet, but we're still gaining as the years go by. So this is kind of a demand and supply graphic. Current demand, we're under 9,000 acre feet. Again, 7,045 acre feet of that is surface water. 1,500 of it is groundwater. So we're trying to show the water use for the past 8 years on the left with the river water, in the blue well water, as I explained. And on the right is the amount that we estimate has been sustainably available year in and year out in that same period. So we have the ability to do about 7,500 acre feet of water, surface water supply, with about 4,500 acre feet of well pumping. So we could pump those wells year after year, about 4,500. We also have the water rights to offset that 4,500 acre feet. And I'll get into how water rights move sort of in and out and how that affects development. So overall, are sustainable, in other words, year in, year out into the future, we have about 12,000 acre feet. Water rights, we actually have more than that. It's almost up to 20,000. But again, if you're only using your well fields, you're drawing down your savings account. So our sustainable sort of budget for production is 1,200 acre feet. Right now, presently, with conservation, because of all of you, we're running less than 9,000 acre feet year to year. So give yourselves a hand. You guys are doing a good job. So this is kind of a show of annual average flow of the New Mexico Rio Grande tributaries, which we are one of them, going back to the 1950s, all the way looking forward at the 2100s. So this blue line is the median flow of all the tributaries of the Rio Grande. And then you're looking at this graph kind of shows all the runs, and then the darker area is 80%. We do modeling looking into the future. So the idea is based on the best available science, we expect there to be about 25 to 33% less available water, surface water, on both the Santa Fe River and the Rio Grande. So we're declining on our surface water supplies. That's the harsh truth of climate change. So what we've been relying on and what the city has grown around the Santa Fe River for over 400 years is not going to be the same river probably in the future that has been in the past. And one of the questions on many people's minds is, what about growth? We're preparing a future where by 2100, there are 130,000 people served in the city limits, and an increase of more than anywhere from 50% for the 84,000 currently served. So right now we have a population of 84,000. So we're expecting another 50% of that. So you're talking 42,000 more people by 2100. So these are projected city of Santa Fe populations. And again, it's best available science potential out of UNM. They have a better business enterprise group that sort of looks at these projections based on US Census data. So what happens when you decrease supply and increase demand and you don't make any other changes? You get shortages, right? So the blue shading in this graph is really trying to show what our shortage will be, basically from the medium climate change scenarios we have modeled. So again, we're looking beyond 2035. So we're here 2022, just before you get to 2025. And if you look, somewhere we're going to have shortages, maybe in the 2035 to 2040. Again, depending on seasonality of water supplies, especially surface water supplies, and also dependent on conservation. Are there other ways we could serve even more, let's say, outdoor water? That's one of the biggest, because I do think people have been very efficient in Santa Fe, again, since that peak in 95, where we were going over 160 gallons per capita per day. But I think the next frontier is really the outdoor conservation piece. So given this, you kind of see the range of climate change. This black line is showing supply uncertainty with climate change. But as early as the next decade, while the median climate change projections could result in shortages by 2050, it really depends again on our behavioral changes and our use around the city of Santa Fe to meet that supply. So we really dove into adaptation strategies to avoid shortages. So this was a basin study report we did with the Bureau of Reclamation, City of Santa Fe, and Santa Fe County, trying to look at what are our alternatives for the future to provide more water supply. So obviously the first one is water conservation, which will continue to be a priority for the City of Santa Fe Water Division. The idea of direct or indirect reclaimed water reuse. So we're moving towards the idea of, with our Buckman direct diversion, San Juan Chama water, we call it, can we use some of our reuse at the wastewater treatment plant to take it back to the Rio Grande? And so you're kind of doing this eternal exchange. It's like but you're not going to do 100%. It's not going to be 1-to-1. So it's only a certain percentage of that water from the wastewater treatment plant could go back to the Rio Grande, and then we would have credits towards San Juan Chama project water for the future. The other possibility is aquifer storage and recovery, and we're looking at various options on that along the Santa Fe River, or if we exchange some of that treated effluent from the wastewater treatment plant, or what we call the reclamation facility, maybe we could do some injection wells or some aquifer storage recovery by the Buckman well field, because it's such a large area. The other one benefit is there's what we call the Santa Fe River target flow. So in 2011, that was passed, and that was some of the water from the Santa Fe River. The community decided we're not going to store it all in the reservoirs, so that everything below the municipal watershed where the Santa Fe River runs would be entirely dry. So this year, you saw a lot of water running through the city, right? That was partially one because we had a great snowpack year late. So the beginning of the snowpack year was pretty dry, wasn't that great of a year. And then boom, after January, we got all these series of storms. We got nice rains in April, May, and we really filled up our reservoirs to our capacity. And we had to keep some freeboard. So we like to keep it full to about 80%, but we don't want to get to 90, 100%, because if you're still getting snowpack melt and runoff, you're just going to uncontrollably spill your reservoirs, and then you just don't have any control. So we like to keep a little freeboard. So what we do is we continue to release flows. We were releasing up to about 50 CFS as a peak, but about 30 CFS through town. Everybody loved it, but we did have to warn people above 10 cubic feet per second of flow. You don't want to get in the river. You could get knocked over, or kids could get swept away, so on and so forth. But with the target flow, the idea is in a year like this, it actually recharges the regional aquifer around the river. So our city well field then rebounds a lot faster. So on years like this, it's a bonus. It's a bountiful year that we actually win in two ways. We have filled up our reservoirs. So our reservoirs are now 97% full, but you also get recharge into the city well field. So that's one of the ideas, is that you can supplement that recharge with aquifer storage and recovery, so that in drought years, you could sort of pull back out of that savings account from the well field. And then there's potential to buy more surface rights. So this is pretty much, it's a phrase, it's not a great phrase in New Mexico, but it's called buy and dry. You buy water rights from farmers and you dry up some of their fields. Like they'll say, you know, our family doesn't farm as much anymore. I've got pre-1907 water rights. So those are unlimited water rights that can move up and down the Rio Grande. And we can buy water rights from a farmer down by Socorro and bring them up to our Buckman well field and utilize them. But that's, again, you're creating, you know, a benefit in one sense for your municipality, a deficit for the farming community on the Rio Grande on the other hand. So buy and dry is not our first choice. We're trying to look at, again, three other ways that we could potentially move forward in the future of our water supplies in case climate change does have such an impact. Okay, so almost 2/3 of the pot of water that is used in the city arrives at the Paseo Real water reclamation facility. Again, I start off with wastewater treatment plant, but I should use the official name, Paseo Real water reclamation facility. And so, you know, the other third is basically, so 3,090 acre feet, 36%, just over a third, is utilized for outdoor watering or leaks in the system. So that basically gets consumed out. So again, you have this potential, you know, supply for reuse into our system as the city grows. So the idea would be for the San Juan Chama project, return flow project, that you achieve full consumption of the San Juan Chama water project that we have a legal right to by getting credit for returning unconsumed San Juan Chama water to the Rio Grande. So in other words, out of all of our supplies that all of us consume through the water utility, you would be returning out of that 60% that went to the water reclamation facility, you would be returning just the portion that came originally off the Rio Grande. So everything that was consumed from the city well field or the Santa Fe River would not count towards that. So again, sort of a continuous loop, and this is what it would look like. So with the same diversion, you would have less release from the upstream reservoirs, but the river would be made whole with effluent being returned back to the Rio Grande. So again, you're kind of recycling what you already consumed once, you're returning it, and then you get more water again from upstream on the San Juan Chama project. So the near-term plan, again, this is our current demand. We're under 9,000 acre feet through 2022 now. Our sustainable supply here is 12,000 acre feet, 7,500 from our surface water supplies, 4,500 potentially from our wells. And with this return flow, we could increase potentially up to 15,500 acre feet of surface water supply, again, mainly out of the Buckman return flow project. Because again, you're returning that treated effluent, you're making the Rio Grande hull, but then you're still getting San Juan Chamba project water upstream of our diversion. Again, getting credits for our unused or reused water from the reclamation facility. So this is sort of a slide added because future water supply reduction, right? So even with the reduction of climate change, if it's 25 to 33% reduction in our surface water supplies, we would still get down to about 14,000 acre feet instead of the 15,500 from utilizing the BDD return flow pipeline project, which is significantly more again than this 7,500 at the sustainable rate that we're looking forward to now in the present. So even though we expect long-term climate change is going to reduce our supplies and growth is going to increase demands, the uncertainty associated with this means that even with the return flow pipeline or project in place, we'll continue to plan and adapt as conditions change. But again, overall, this is kind of a win-win for the water utility to increase its supplies. We've also been doing sort of long-term planning. So we call this Water 2100. So it really incorporates a 5-step process, planning process. So we've done a lot of this planning already. You saw the report from the Bureau of Reclamation along with the city of Santa Fe. We've looked at demand projections. So that was that line graph that showed the increase from 84,000 to potentially up to more than that, 50% more of our population. And now we're sort of looking at, okay, so what are those supply projection shortages with climate change, adaptation strategies. So that's what I talked about, continuing to do conservation, but what types of conservation do we need to focus on? Again, citizens of Santa Fe have done a great job on indoor conservation. Now it's the realm of how do we decrease the outdoor usage to add to our conservation, but also aquifer storage and recovery, this potential Buckman direct diversion return flow pipeline. And then from there, we're looking at developing this. Office of the State Engineer requires you to have a 40-year water plan, which we do now, but we want to look at 80 years. Albuquerque Water Utility Authority, they have a plan for 100 years. It doesn't mean you're going to hit the mark every time, but if at least your minimum and maximum sort of parameters, like what may be the worst case scenario or what may be the best case scenario for our supplies. Maybe climate change isn't that impactful and we've done a good job of planning and preparing for these shortages, then we'll at least put that into a realistic planning scenario instead of just waving our arms and throwing a dart at the board. So that's kind of the process for our water resources group. So again, we can either utilize all the water out of fire hydrant and not know where it all goes, or we could be efficient in our supplies. And there's a website here where you can look at this presentation that we have. But so hopefully, the idea is that we're showing how we're utilizing efficiently through the water division our water supplies, but then we also have a process in place to keep updating the answer to the question is, where is the water coming from for development? Again, we feel we have the capacity to build out this new development that's happening, but it's also, there was a previous presentation by the mayor at the men's breakfast where he said the city of Santa Fe is at an inflection point, right? So there's a lot of, properties, there's a lot of areas of the city where you used to have ranchettes or, an acre, 2 acres. And there's some infill happening because some of those families are selling off their properties for their family or their, next generations. And you're getting infill or maybe more dense development that's occurring around Santa Fe because it's needed. I think we have a shortage of over 6,000 homes or at least multifamily units. But you could do it in a smart way. You could be doing it where you have efficient growth that also, again, has efficient water usage. And you spread it out over the community where you have, a balance of the need for not only single family residential, but multifamily residential. Affordable housing is a big topic around Santa Fe, for people to be able to afford to live here. I know there's at least 2 previous motels on Cerritos that they're converting to affordable housing to create that opportunity. So there's a lot of things happening. I would also ask that you engage with the land use department. They're coming up with a new land use plan. They're doing code changes. It's your opportunity to express like, hey, we'd like to see this happen. Like, what kind of growth would you like to see? Giving your input of what types of growth you'd like to see around the city, because it matters. And it matters in the way that it affects our water supply. So I still think I have a few more minutes, like 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And I'll start with some questions. Yeah.
Just technologically, how do you measure the depth of the aquifer?
So they have various ways. So the old ways is you can have, like with our wells, or they actually have what we call monitoring wells. So we have various monitoring wells in the Buckman well field. They measure the depth to water basically with a tape. Now we have more modern equipment called transducers that could tell us every 15 minutes what is that water level throughout the aquifer. The Buckman well field aquifer is really complex. It's got different geologic layers of time and different geologic profiles, you call them. So what is the material under the ground? Clay tends to hold water, sandy soil, the water just seeps right through. And there are various different geologic zones in the Buckman well field, which we kind of have to contend with. And again, the state engineer regulates that area with us to make sure that we're not pumping more than we should and impacting the residents around there. So we are regulated on how much pumping we could do sustainably year to year. Maybe questions?
It's a long litigation with Texas to figure out how much water from the Rio Grande that we owe them.
Mm-hmm.
And how did that all play out?
It's still playing out because the states agreed on an agreement of how much water. So in a nutshell, what was occurring is that we owe so much water to Texas because there was an agreement, I think back in the 1940s, of how much water, surface water from the Rio Grande, so that's basically native water, needs to continue to be supplied to West Texas. What was happening is in those years that farmers couldn't get water below Elephant Butte. Elephant Butte is the big key measuring point down to Caballo. Caballo is like southern Rio Grande irrigators. So if they didn't get the water, then they would turn to their wells and really pump their wells. Well, that was when you pump wells, it draws from the same aquifer that the Rio Grande is in. So Texas was like, wait a minute, you can't have it both ways, New Mexico. Like, you owe us the water, and every time you give us the water, because you're pumping so much, the surface water is draining into the groundwater to make up for what you were pumping. That was their case. So thankfully, both states figured it out, like, hey, we can come to a conclusion. Now the federal government needs to weigh in, and they initially didn't like the agreement because, like the San Juan Chama project water, that's controlled by the Bureau of Reclamation. So the Bureau of Reclamation has to weigh in, and the federal agencies to say, okay, this is a good deal for both sides. We'll continue to manage it this way, or we don't like what you guys are agreeing upon, and how's this going to work? So I think it's still in, I don't know the legal word, but contention to try to figure this out. Yes.
Agreement with the Indians and water quality.
On the amount you're talking about?
Well, no, I'm talking about the water quality period.
From Los Alamos?
From well,
Yeah. What?
anything we're drawing.
So
And what are we sending down to Turkey and else there?
I can't speak for Albuquerque Water Utility Authority's water quality because I'm not that close to it, monitoring it all the time. But for us, our water quality is really great. Again, 40% comes out of the mountains. It's natural spring runoff from snow melt. So that's our cheapest source. Our city well field, there was an old P&M site near Baca Street. So Santa Fe well, we had to shut down. Since then, P&M's been slowly trying to remediate that area. But we don't use any city well field near that. Buckman well field, we do monitoring. So does Los Alamos National Lab for uranium, arsenic. Arsenic is a naturally occurring mineral in New Mexico. Yeah, most areas you can't escape it. So we do arsenic testing. But so far, no impacts from water quality from those, potential like legacy contaminants from landfills so far. Yeah, we'll continue to monitor that. Some worry that like the chromium plume up there for Los Alamos, they're trying to hold it back or remediate that. That hasn't had an effect on our Buckman well field. Hasn't crossed the line of the Rio Grande aquifer. So we'll continue to work with Lano. We'll continue to monitor our localized sources, but so far nothing of great concern. Yes, question back here.
So in the projections for the population of Santa Fe, it appears to almost follow a straight line on that graph. And it's pretty clear to me that somewhere in the future, that graph is going to have to turn over. We're not going to be able to continually increase our water supply long into the future. And part of the assumptions I think that go into that graph is, okay, well, the building industry is going to continue at the same rate that it has in the past, and the demand for Santa Fe is going to be high like it's been in the past. But it would seem to me that one could have different projection curves depending on to what extent building is controlled in Santa Fe, like new building projects and the approval process for new building projects. And part of the criteria for new building projects might be the availability of water. And certainly that's going to have to happen sometimes in a great grandchildren's future, if not ours.
So that is happening now, and that really actually started happening back in '95. So in '95, we had this toilet retrofit program where if you were going to add a new toilet or bathroom to your development, or you're building a casita for a family member in the back, every bathroom you added, every toilet, you had to retrofit 9 other toilets throughout the city of Santa Fe. It ended up creating this, and so what you would get was a certificate, and we had inspectors that said, yes, you turned in 9 old toilets for your 1 new bathroom. And we created this like black market of toilet retrofit credits, toilet plumbers going around and like retrofitting all these toilets. So we ended up shutting it down. But there's still these, golden tickets of retrofit certified that some developers buy and exchange and turn them in. But that was the start of like, okay, how do we track future growth through water usage? And the way we do it is through water rights. So we do have a program where every new development, every addition of water and demand has to bring water rights. Because water rights are very expensive, we're buying some for about $14,400, but the market for developers is up to $20,000 per acre foot for new water rights to come into our Buckman well field, again adding to our savings account. We kind of came up with this, or the council as a policy came up with a threshold. So 10 acre feet, which is fairly significant. You could do about 50 to 60 single family residential homes. you don't have to go out, get a lawyer, buy water rights from a farmer on the middle Rio Grande. You pay us at 16,600 per acre foot a check for us to go out and buy the water rights or find the water. So that has really, through the land use development process, that has really slowed, I think, the development community from just going out and finding an open field, buying the property. Some of the larger developers can do that because they have the capital, but then they also have to find the water. So that's a different ball game, and it takes time. Going through the state engineer process could take anywhere from 6 months to 18 months to get approval of those water rights transferred from a farmer up to the city of Santa Fe. So there's added capital costs for developers, and I think that has really slowed rampant development. And I don't necessarily think in the future that we'll have same rates of growth all the time, and those population growth models that UNM does takes that into account. They do. That's kind of the average. Things could slow down, like after the 2008 crash, market forces. If I'm a developer, I'm not going to be building because nobody's going to be buying units. Nobody's going to be buying houses. So we saw a lot of developers who were holding on to water rights. They immediately started selling those water rights because they're like, I don't need these anymore. This is a dead asset that's going to sit around. Or some of them saved them. So I think we have conservation measures built into our land development process. And I don't think there will be rapid, continuous development that way. But other factors, do we have the space? Can the city continue to grow? Is the turnover of infill maxed out? I mean, you're right, those things may slow that curve down on population. Another question.
Would it be efficient to capture some of the rainwater? There's just tremendous runoff, and at least in our area, the drainage looks very, very inefficient. So I wondered if there could be would there be any purpose to having an incentive program so individuals would capture rainwater or neighborhoods would capture rainwater?
Yeah, and we did for a little while. We had 55-gallon rain barrels that we provided, and we were giving rebates for people who were doing French drains or doing active storage of rainwater to then be used outdoors. We still have that small rebate program, and we've tried it. It got a little difficult. We have what's called the water efficiency rating score in our land use development process, and that score gives developers more efficiency and effectiveness to then finance their projects. If they show they're going to use xeriscape planting, they're putting in more rainwater catchment. And a lot of the developers, they've already baked that into their process. They're becoming more efficient on saving water. But on larger scales, we tried that historically on the rail yard park. But the state engineer also said, well, you can capture the rain that's falling on your buildings, but not the land, because the land with the surface water runoff of precipitation that goes to the local Santa Fe River, which again is a tributary to the Rio Grande, and the Santa Fe River is subject to the Texas Compact. So don't take that water to hold it locally. So there's a little bit of policy in there. You can capture what's on your buildings and properties, but if it's like a public area of the city and it drains into a tributary to the Santa Fe River to the Rio Grande, that's where the state engineers said, well, wait a minute, that's water of the state of New Mexico. And that's something that maybe in the future could get worked out where, okay, maybe it's still water of the state of New Mexico, but with an aquifer storage and recovery program, that water could still be held and then slowly moved through time. Instead of, like 2018, we had a big flood event and our engineering stormwater system worked great. It shoved all the water out of the city of Santa Fe and flooded the county. That's not your point. Well, why couldn't we capture some of that water for future, usage? I think that's something to be explored. two more questions, one in the back.
We were very impressed on your city day 2 years ago, of, being able to visit Reese Baker's home
Mhm.
in the water restoration or cleaning of the water that comes down the gutters. By planting natural grasses and mushrooms, in the gutters, to have it flow back into the river system.
Yeah.
He indicated in that presentation on Earth Day out of the county that the city is looking into doing that on a broader scale. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, and if you go to Brothers Lane, up on East Alameda, you'll see that there's a new rain garden system there. There's another one on West Alameda, across from the co-op, in that area in the Solana Center. So we're starting, Public Works is starting to implement more stormwater catchment process. But on a major road artery like Cerritos, where you get a lot of water during monsoon season very quickly. And again, this is this climate change effect where maybe we don't get as much snowpack and snow during the winter months, but boy, the monsoons, I mean, that 2018 flood event was a 500 to 1,000 year event. We had 4 inches an hour on Guadalupe Street. Like, that's just a lot of water all at once. So how do you mitigate that? How do you slow it down so it can get to the river in a significant way, which is slowing down the volume of water? So Public Works is looking at that. I don't know about large scale, right now, we're not planning like a large scale kind of infiltration project across the city. More like, section by section, sort of district by district throughout the city, to take advantage of that. But a lot of, St. Francis, Cerritos is it's engineered stormwater systems. You had one question.
Yes, so in the typical rainstorm, what fraction of the rain goes in evaporation and leaves New Mexico, and what fraction goes into recharge?
That is a very good question. It depends on the year. It depends on the relative humidity of the air. In other words, how quickly it'll evaporate off. It depends on the plants. The plants thirsty and they're going to take it all up. That's a great meteorological question that I just don't know off the top of my head. Yeah.
Is there any rule for new developments not to put in lawns because lawns take so much water?
Yeah, there's incentives there. And so there's a whole section about vegetation and which types of trees should be planted, there's definitely coding there that says, we don't want ferns everywhere across your property or turf. And it does, like developers are incentivized to have less turf, but for developers, especially like a multifamily development, they want to have some area that has grass or lawn. But I will give credit, some of the schools and some of our parks are doing AstroTurf now and trying to work with that, because it does take a lot of maintenance. But AstroTurf has its pros and cons also. Sometimes they could be heat islands because they really warm up. So it's a trade-off, but we do definitely, and again, this is that water efficiency rating score. It's trying to create that balance of like, we don't want developers to just say, okay, I'm going to build a multifamily complex and you get rock with a couple, cactus out there. So how do you incentivize it to where it's a balance of something that's localized plants, xeriscape, nice to look at, and you could also have kids out on a field. So that's part of the WERS score, is how do you create a score so that they can get some of both and also get the credits toward their cost in the future. Yep. Yeah.
Just curious about all the charts that we looked at, it's strictly the city of Santa Fe.
Yes.
And so does the county have its own plan?
Yes.
And does the plan that we just looked at sort of bake in what happens within the county? Because are they pulling from the same resources or no?
They are pulling from similar resources, so they get the majority of their water from the Buckman direct diversion. And if that facility ever goes down, then we have what's called a water resource agreement to provide them. I think at this point, it's 1,300 acre feet. So they do have us as backup. And so we're very intertwined. Our conservation committee members always meet with their conservation committee members and their plans. You know, they had a pretty good plan about monitoring new domestic wells, because there's a lot more domestic wells in the county that are licensed because they can't reach them. You know, they don't have, the county doesn't have all the infrastructure. And you'll see, you know, the county's building a line, looking at hooking up Canyoncito, El Dorado area to their water supply system. And there may be in the future up here, once Amont is all figured out on the infrastructure, will they be bringing in water from our east side to Bishop's Lodge? So in other words, wheeling some of their water through our system to reach some of their clients or constituents. So we're working arm in arm with them all the time. And yeah, don't read the newspapers where it says, you know, the mayor's at the throat of the county and the county's at the throat, you know. That's sort of going on the Agua Fria Street area about, again, what does land use look like for the future? We as staff work with this county all the time. Our production meetings every week, county staff are there because we can't work without them. They can't work without us. So it's a very symbiotic relationship. Another question?
Not about Santa Fe, but do you have any comment or clarification about the Supreme Court's recent decision against the nation request?
I don't, you know, I can't, I wouldn't even start to speak on it. Yeah, I think more importantly, I think the ruling about the Clean Water Act really affects New Mexico, because we have a, you know, Santa Fe River, it's not perennial, which perennial means runs year round. Even historically, it was ephemeral at best, which means it runs in the spring, early summer, but there's a point where all that runoff from the snowpack sort of peters out. And unless you have monsoon contribution of the river, it only runs some of the year. So the Clean Water Act really, they defined it saying, no, it has to only be a tributary to a continuously navigable running river like the Rio Grande. And if it's not, then it's not covered by the Clean Water Act, which has a lot of land use and water quality implications to a lot of rivers and streams in New Mexico that are contributing, but they're not year round, so they don't have protections. Well, with that, I'll finish up, and thank you all for your time. Thanks for coming.